For the day I've had, I'm going to have a nice cold Sauvignon.
Oh, right, okay.
From downstairs.
But the show is obviously picking you up.
Yeah.
Of course, the show is excellent.
Very good.
Okay, nice recovery. So, here we go with tonight's tale, which comes from Cowboy Clint. Thank you, Cowboy Clint, for today's tale. Father Simon, Sister Susie and Brother Matt from the Elite Chapter of Forgiveness. I wish to be forgiven for an incident that took place around 14 years ago. At the time, I had a moderately successful wedding video business.
Oh, here we go.
A lot of my bookings were on the back of recommendations, and I was proud to say I was receiving some very positive feedback from my customers. I was booked to film the wedding of a couple, we'll call Angela and Brad. They had picked the most amazing venue in the town to get married. The church looked very stately with its tall ceiling, its beautiful altar, incredible windows and much more. I made it a rule to attend the wedding rehearsal to view the layout, and most importantly, to kindly ask the vicar if I could stand at the front of the church to get a clear view of the bride and groom exchanging rings. I arrived early to the rehearsal and saw the vicar waiting in the church entrance. Fortunately for you, Father Simon, he looked a lot like the vicar from Dad's Army.
Okay.
I decided to use this opportunity to ask him where I could film on the wedding day. His reply was, "You're to stand out of view. I suggest behind the pillar over there, in the corner."
Just shameless. Really.
He pointed, I mean, if you close your eyes, it could actually be him. He pointed to a pillar inside the church in the very, very far corner. The vicar then continued to say, and frequently, he'd often had cowboy operators. He didn't like a cowboy camera operator because they disturbed the wedding services by constantly moving about when the vows were being exchanged. I knew that I shouldn't have said howdy, but I thought he had a good point, and I thanked him for allowing me to film as long as I stuck to the rules. The day the wedding arrived and I found my pillar and hid behind it, I began setting up the video equipment. I was so far away, I would need to place a radio mic on Brad. I placed the transmitter in his inside jacket pocket and the clip microphone on his lapel. Running back over to my camera, I was very pleased with the quality of sound coming through my headphones. Not a hum or a crackle. The ceremony began. Angela walked down the aisle looking radiant and joined Brad at the front. I'd wired up Brad because he had pockets and Ange didn't have any pockets. All was going well with my recording. It was only when the vicar began to greet everybody that it became clear something was very wrong. What came over the church speakers was a mechanical screeching noise. The vicar looked embarrassed and screeched out an apology. "My goodness," he said, "I sound like a Dalek. There must be something very wrong with my microphone," he said. He unclipped it and shouted over to the verger for another microphone. Fortunately for you, Father Simon, the verger is just like the verger in Dad's Army.
Dad's Army again.
I'll tell his reverence. The verger didn't hesitate and came running over with a handheld microphone. Imagine that. A radio handheld microphone. Now the vicar began speaking, and there were even more mechanical screeching noises over the speakers, just as bad as the other microphone, but the tone just slightly different. I thought he sounded as though he was another Dalek. It was then that I noticed that the screeching sound was worse when he went closer to Brad. I realized that my radio transmitter was on the same frequency, causing the interference with the church radio microphones. I was responsible for this terrible noise over the speakers that was ruining the wedding as far as the congregation were concerned. So I checked my headphones. My sound was still perfect. Therefore, I had a dilemma. Do I switch off my radio receiver to stop the interference? But that would risk not having any sound on the wedding video, and my reputation would be in ruins. I thought, what to do? Well, I'm ashamed to say, I decided to leave the receiver switched on and the congregation could go hang. We had, because the video is obviously far more important.
Yeah.
We had just got to the vows, screeching and embarrassed apologies from the vicar notwithstanding, when help was again at hand. Again, it was the verger who came running from the back of the church for a second time and handed the vicar another. "I've got a microphone."
Another one?
Yes.
Wow.
But this one, it had a cable attached. The verger was a rather large man, and I felt so guilty as he clearly looked out of breath. In fact, I thought it might be the end of him, but he did survive. Anyway, the microphone worked and there was no more interference. But, Father Simon, I don't ask forgiveness from the vicar, as I think he secretly enjoyed entertaining the wedding guests with his Dalek impressions. Nor do I ask forgiveness from Angela and Brad, who I recall found the incident rather amusing once it had been explained. Now I ask forgiveness from the embarrassed mother and all the irate guests sat on the third pew from the front, who, when the vicar said he sounded like a Dalek, prompted two small boys to run in the aisle, pretending to shoot each other with their fingers, shouting at the top of their voices, "Exterminate!" which, on balance, is not conducive to a spiritual experience. I don't know if you've actually tried that. Have you?
No. Oh, wow, that was smooth.
Well, I was just trying to get into the groove of the church mixing test.
Clearly. Wow.
Anyway, so we've got kids shouting "exterminate." He's got the vicar sounding like a Dalek, and it's Cowboy Clint's fault, Sister Susie from the pub.
Well, Cowboy Clint, can you have just switched the frequency of your transmitter? Wouldn't that have fixed it? I don't know. That's what I feel like should have happened. But also, no one watches the wedding video. It's just like
That's true.
not as important as the actual day. And that sounds like it would have been incredibly frustrating to listen to. So I can't forgive you because I couldn't have sat through that wedding.
I said at the time I had a moderately successful wedding video business, so I suspect, Susie,
It doesn't anymore.
It doesn't anymore. Brother from another guy.
Yeah, Susie's quite right to say nobody ever watches wedding video. Who mics up the groom? I mean, what's the point of that? If you're not going to be miking up the bride as well, it makes no sense. You're going to hear one side of the vows.
She didn't have any pockets.
I know she didn't have pockets, but you can fit it somewhere. Use your imagination. This church, where's it getting all these microphones? Got more microphones than Live Aid. They're all over it. I've got another one. Virgin's got another one. I've got one with a mic and I've got one with a cable. So for that reason, just because of all the Dad's Army references, I'm going to forgive.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Cowboy Clint? 61054 on the text. Start your message with Simon. 61054. First word is Simon. Forgiven on. We have a confession, and the confession came from Cowboy Clint, whose wedding video radio mic interfered with the church PA, which made the vicar sound like a Dalek, and all the kids were yelling "exterminated," all the old people. Anyway, with hilarious consequences, the people's verdict is in, and it goes like this.
Yes, just about everyone is forgiving. Hilarious, says Jerry. Cowboy Clint rides again. Simon, your impressions are really getting better and better.
No one else says that.
No. Melanie says forgiven. A moment of hilarity in exchange for a wedding video with sound. I know which one I'd rather have. And Rachel says forgiven, but only because we were treated to Simon's slightly creepy vicar impression and Matt and Susie's simultaneous knowing reaction to the mic being on the same frequency.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the frequency, Kenneth? Anyway, that could have been the title. I could have called it that. Oh. So if you have a confession, we would love to hear it, and we'll swap it for a smart speaker. Wedding confession, wedding video confession, vicars, Daleks.
Daleks?
Anything else?
Right, okay.
Include them. Put them in a confession. If we read it out, you get a smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Basically, stating the obvious. Let's check in with producer Susie, Sister Susie in the saloon bar, making sure we get how many out of 10 today?
10 out of 10.
1 out of 10, that's very good. And a surprise, I think.
Yeah.
What's our drink of the day, please?
Well, it's Tuesday, so if you don't fancy a wine like we had yesterday, then maybe a gin and tonic.
Oh, gin and
go
tonic.
Down well.
Yeah.
Okay, what gin are we going with?
I quite like a Scottish gin called Caroon.
Okay, we'll go with that. Thank you very much indeed. So, whilst we're enjoying that, always drink responsibly.
Obviously.
Here is today's confession, which comes from Bobby Boris Crypt Kicker. And we're getting into the October spooky groove.
Oh,
here.
are we?
Yes.
Oh.
Dear Apparitional Abbot and the Frightful Friars, I'm pretty sure that the statute of limitations has long since passed on my confession, having taken place in the mid to late 90s. Let me tell you, Bobby Boris Crypt Kicker, a lot of confessions go back a lot further than that, and they are not forgiven. It was All Hallows Eve in the year of our Lord 1998 or thereabouts. A tradition had developed round our way of taking our kids and their friends along a nearby tree-lined lane that led to an empty and rather creepy abandoned farmhouse. It must have been quite imposing once upon a time, but now it was just a collapsed ruin. The outside walls were barely intact, crumbling interior walls, creaky floorboards were still there, tons of dust and cobwebs, and an impossible-to-climb wreckage of a staircase. "Don't go up there, kids," I would always say. The kids were all dressed in horror-related costumes, rustled up any torches that they could find, and off we went. My wife and I told stories of the horrid old farmer, his scary wife, and their ghostly family, who had been eaten by a demonic horse called Patsy during the Dark Ages. It's a very specific story. Followed by their mysterious disappearance. This kind of thing happened a lot in the Dark Ages, I explained.
Yeah, all the time.
Much screaming and terror ensued, as you can imagine. But this year, an opportunity for further fun and fright presented itself. One of the girls' father had returned from work in his domestic appliance repair van just as we neared the end of our lane. So we all thought it would be a wizard wheeze to jump out and scare him. I thought I'd add a little extra drama by borrowing my son's Halloween mask. Imagine this is like a Halloween from the movie Halloween.
Yes.
Instantly, I was transformed into something spawned in the very bowels of Mordor.
Like the Dad's Army.
Now, Mr. Yateman, no, come on. My Lord of the Rings voice is not the same as the Verger.
That was Lord of the Rings.
Or the Vicar.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was Mordor.
The very bowels of Mordor. Come on.
What? Via Falkirk.
Now, I could have just crept up and gone boo, or I could have banged menacingly on the side of the van. But no, I chose to open the van door and launch myself into the cab with a blood-curdling scream. This had a rather profound effect on the occupants, surprisingly, as a rather large gentleman leapt across the cabin with surprising athleticism into the arms of his passenger, who was himself scrambling to escape while screaming like a baby. You see, this wasn't my friend and neighbour at all, as you might have guessed, but two of his colleagues who'd turned up in an identical van to collect a door seal for a Zanussi. How was I to know?
On tonight of all nights.
As the dust settled, my slightly less than heartfelt apology was not particularly well received by these two complete strangers. Possibly, I think they were antagonised by my laughter. I was, in fact, holding my sides and crying at the time. So, Father Simon, I seek not forgiveness from the kids who had the, quotes, best Halloween ever, nor from my neighbour who no doubt had to put up with his colleagues' abuse. I don't even ask forgiveness from the two unknown domestic appliance engineers because, quite frankly, what use will they be in a zombie apocalypse? I mean, if you're going to judge everybody by that standard,
yes.
what use is anyone, really? Right. No, Father Simon, I seek forgiveness from the long-suffering and fragrant Mrs. Crypt-Kicker, who for several days thereafter had to put up with me bursting into bouts of spontaneous, uncontrollable laughter at all hours of the time and of the day and night, all the while sporting the "it wasn't that funny" face. And we all know what face that looks like. Many spectral salutations, team. Your ever humble disciple, Bobby Boris Crypt-Kicker. Very good.
Good fade, yeah.
Well, actually, I thought that was one of my favourites. Come on, that worked. So, Sister Susie goes first. I mean, this appears reckless in the extreme, I think.
Well, I hate scary things. I just hate scary things. I don't like scary movies. I'm just too invested. I get too scared and then I think about it for ages afterwards. So I just don't like what you've done anyway, Bobby Boris Crypt-Kicker. And also, scaring people is never going to go well because you either really scare them and that's not very nice, or it's not the people who you thought it was, which has happened in this instance, and they're really scared as well, even more scared because they don't even know you. And I feel sorry for Mrs. Crypt-Kicker because, you know,
she's married to Mr. Crypt-Kicker.
Yeah, because she's married to you, yeah. Just silly. Don't forgive you. Not very nice.
Okay. I mean, it's you, and also judging someone as to whether they'd be any use in a zombie apocalypse. Who would be any use?
I think I'd be very good.
Would you?
Just a hunch.
You've got a flamethrower?
Yes, I've got all of them. So, I mean, things could have gone a lot worse here, couldn't they, really? I mean, I didn't really... Well, you know, I mean, the demonic horse, for one, that could have really turned things around.
Called Patsy.
Called Patsy, in fact. And what are the chances that there are going to be two guys turning up in a van that's exactly the same as the other van? None.
It's a work
It's
van.
a perfectly legitimate mistake to make. mistake. Not quite so easy for the guys from Zanussi. So for that reason, I choose to forgive.
Dear.
Okay, well, it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Bobby Boris Crypt Kicker? On the text 61054, start your message with Simon. You can email simon@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Today's confession from Bobby Boris Crypt Kicker was basically about scaring a couple of Zanussi operatives by jumping into their car and going boo. And it was an act carried out in front of many children, and obviously Bobby Boris Crypt Kicker found it very, very funny. Whether anyone else did, we'll find out. The people's verdict like this.
Well, Michelle says, forgiven. There is a time and place for frightening someone, but this was a complete mistake. Totally agree with Matt. Charlotte from Chippenham, not forgiven. I feel sorry for the wife, too. Not only was he laughing at his own prank, he kept laughing at it for days. And James says, forgiven, just for the accents and the laughs alone. More, please.
Well, that's entirely down to you. Send us a confession which involves lots of accents, and it'll definitely be on. If you've got a spooky one, that would be nice for Halloween. But if you just fancy a smart speaker, and maybe that's provoked a little memory for you to go, oh, you know what, I could tell a story. Well, send your confession to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Although it is a little bit cold.
It is. I mean, obviously it's cold because it's, October.
So let's just check in live at the Saloon Bar. Producer Sister Susie there. Just checking you're there. How many marks have we got out of 10 today?
10 out of 10.
Still 10.
Wow.
That's good. Consistent scoring.
Consistent,
And what is our drink of the day, please?
Well, I thought maybe a nice hoppy pale ale would be good, but maybe a half a pint rather than the full
Just a
pint.
half, because it's Wednesday. Yes.
It's Wednesday.
Okay, so that's our drink of the day. Thank you very much. Today's confession comes from Hannibal Hayes. Thank you, Hannibal Hayes. That'll mean something to some people. Father Simon, Brother Matthew, Sister Susie, and everyone else of the Redemption Convention.
Oh, I like that.
Oh, I like that one.
I think that's very good. I think that's new. Hannibal Hayes says, I write to you of the events of the summer of 1980, when as a young man of 20, 3 of us decided that we would go on a camping holiday to France. The group consisted of me, BJ, and Dave. Now, we'd heard that the train guards of SNCF, the French railway company, weren't usually able to collect payment if they found someone on the train without a ticket. Their policy was to get the driver to stop at the very next station and throw them off. As we were in no hurry to get to a particular destination, we thought we would test this on a trip to the south of France and see what happened. I realise now that trying to avoid paying a fare on a train is a stupid thing to do.
It is. Don't condone this.
Silly.
Absolutely.
Our first journey was the overnight sleeper service from Calais to Marseille. Our carefully thought-out strategy was to have a beer whilst waiting for the train and then to sleep on the floor between the carriages and ignore any requests for tickets. Not much of a strategy. At some point in the night, I became aware of the guard asking me for a ticket, and on receiving no response, getting a couple of hefty kicks in the back until he gave up and moved on to BJ. Unfortunately, BJ was a less tolerant soul to this kind of treatment, and, forgetting our strategy, did respond to the guard. Once the guard established that he had no ticket, he marched him and his backpack off down the train. Dave and I exchanged glances and decided that the best support we could give him was to go back to sleep. Lads. The next thing we knew, sometime later, BJ waking us up and saying we had to get off the train urgently. What had happened was that BJ had been taken to a small guard's compartment and locked inside. He also needed to go to the loo at some stage whilst he was locked up. On regaining his composure, BJ surveyed the lock on the door. These doors were opened by train conductor T-bar keys, and the Boy Scout in BJ worked out that his corkscrew might fit the lock. After a bit of fiddling, he successfully unlocked the door and came to find us. We agreed with his opinion that it was time to leave, and fortunately it wasn't long before the train pulled into the next station and we slipped away out of sight of the guard. The next day we made it down to a place called Bandol, and we found out there was a campsite a couple of kilometres inland up in the hills. As we walked up the road, we saw in the distance a lone figure heading the same way. As we drew closer, the only thing that could be seen was an enormous backpack of the kind commonly found in the army's surplus stores of the time. On drawing level, we found underneath his backpack a girl of our age struggling up the hot road to the same campsite. Her name was Elaine, and she came from Glasgow and travelling alone on a railcard on holiday in France. Well, we immediately struck up a rapport, and she decided to camp next to us. For the next 10 days, the four of us led a bohemian lifestyle under canvas, consuming pizza and pastis in roughly, that's a blackcurrant liqueur, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Roughly similar, is that, I should ask Susie actually, is that blackcurrant? No, it's not, it's aniseed.
Oh, yes, like the Pernod stuff,
Disgusting,
isn't it?
yeah. Anyway, we consumed them in roughly similar volumes and trying to escape the non-stop Euro disco being played over the camp loudspeakers each evening. When the time came to return home, Elaine decided to join us on the journey. We made it to Lyon without mishap, and as we had an afternoon and evening to kill before the night train to Calais, we retired to the park with cheese and baguette to discover the delights of the Côte de Rhône. As the evening drew in, we realised we cut it a bit fine to head back to the station. Jogging back to the station, we saw our train at the platform and saw with horror the doors closing and whistles being blown. As the train slowly started pulling away, we reached the remaining open guard's door and managed to pull ourselves up inside, just like they do in the movies.
Wow.
However, looking back, we saw poor Elaine with her enormous backpack struggling to keep up with the train as it gathered speed. We should definitely stop, I said. We should definitely be gentlemen, I said, and we should definitely jump off, I said. We didn't. Looking back, we saw poor Elaine with her enormous backpack struggling to keep up with the train as it gathered speed, and as she finally gave up, she sadly raised her hand in forlorn farewell. At this moment, BJ had his moment of inspiration. Turning to the guard, he said, "Stop the train, she's got our tickets." Naturally, the guard gave us the most Gallic of shrugs, shut the door and walked off. We then settled down for the trip, and each time the guard came for our tickets, we said, "Sorry, Leon, the girl, our tickets, she was too slow." Well, and off he went. So we had a very comfortable and untroubled trip home. We felt very badly about losing Elaine a bit, and being the time before mobile phones and email, it was a few days before we established that she had arrived home safely in Glasgow and all was well. So, Simon, I think forgiveness is needed on three fronts. Firstly, from the SNCF for abusing their ticketing policy, which is not a practice I would defend now I'm older.
No, and
definitely
neither would we.
condemn that.
No,
Yes.
wouldn't
Secondly, from
at
the
all.
guard on the Marseille train, who would have been both surprised and dismayed in equal measure at BJ's disappearance from the compartment and what he left in his place. And thirdly, and most importantly, from Elaine, who we left on the platform at Lyon station and whose absence we then happily used to our advantage. Sadly, Dave is no longer with us, but BJ and I are still friends. We meet up every year to catch up and reminisce on events of our youth. I know he would also like to share any forgiveness or lack of that we are deemed worthy of. Well, Hannibal Hayes, I think it's a very shocking tale of rotten, caddish behaviour. So anyway, let's see what Sister Susie makes of this.
Well, I don't like it at all, Hannibal Hayes. You didn't support your friend, first of all, when he got stuck in the cabin. You just went back to sleep. That's rude. But also, poor Elaine. I don't think that you were that bothered that you left her there. But my thing is, did you not offer to help her with the big, massive bag?
Good point.
When you were walking to the train station with her, and maybe if you'd have helped her, she wouldn't have not made it on the train.
Correct.
And for that reason, I can't forgive you.
Brother from another guy.
Well, I am struggling to see where we need to find forgiveness here.
What?
Really? I mean, as far as the SNCF, obviously don't condone, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But as far as Elaine's concerned, she got home safely, so that was all fine. And also, am I the only one that's thinking, maybe, Elaine, you shouldn't have been carrying such a massive bag. If your bag's too big and you can't run with your bag, guess you should have got a smaller bag. So,
it's
is
her
it all
fault.
your fault,
It's
Elaine?
not her
Yes,
fault.
it probably is. Should have got a smaller bag, Elaine.
Okay.
You would have left Elaine there as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right there. People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Hannibal Hayes? Yes or no? On the text, please, 61054. Start your message with Simon. You can email simon@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Forgiveness for Hannibal Hayes or not? So just before the news, we heard from Hannibal Hayes, who was having a European train-based holiday, met up with Elaine from Glasgow, lived a bohemian lifestyle full of pizza and pasties. I read it first time as pasties. Not a lot of pasties
Well,
in
there's
the
nothing wrong with
South
that.
part, no.
Yeah.
But then left her behind when she couldn't keep up when racing for the train. Caddish behaviour indeed. People's verdict is in. It's like this.
So Wendy in Taunton says, not forgiven. I can't believe they left that poor young woman behind, but I think she was 100% better off without them. Good riddance. Darren in Hull, no forgiveness. The carnage left behind was bad enough, but to admit to no remorse, Elaine's bag was clearly too big, though. Vicky
Did
in
you
North...
just add that in? in.
No, I didn't. But Vicky in Northampton does not hold back on my verdict. She says, not forgiven. And I feel I am speaking directly to Matt here. The reason most women have such enormous bags is because the menfolk around them are so incapable of organising themselves that they end up carrying half their stuff as well. A truism the boys bought into and exploited here by claiming that the tickets were with their abandoned girlfriend. You can't have it both ways, boys.
Correct.
Not forgiven.
Thank you very much indeed for offloading in that spectacular style. So Hannibal Hayes gets the smart speaker. Maybe you have a train travel, maybe a rail card kind of confession, let down by the boys confession, big rucksack confession. I don't know what that would be. Anyway, if you've got one and it's good enough and we use it and you get a smart speaker, which seems like a pretty good thing. So the email it has its own pigeonhole. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. 5:48, it's confession time, so gather round. Sister Susie actually in the studio today and not in the pub. The pub is obviously just, is it open?
It
Shut?
is open.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
But you're not there.
I'm not there.
What's our drink of the day?
How about a nice rum?
A rum.
Just thinking what Matt drinks. It's Thursday, so he is drinking rum today.
Rum and ginger ale, I think, tonight.
Yeah.
He always has the same drink every day of the week.
Every day, yes.
Oh, well, I think you need to mix it up. Maybe you have to have what I suggest is a drink of the day next week.
Yeah.
definitely
So the
do that.
rum, that's what you said?
No, what I suggest next week.
We move on with the confession then, which today comes from Mr. H. Poirot.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. H. Poirot. Father Simon, Father Matt, Sister Susie. I'd like to confess about an incident that occurred a couple of years ago. The story begins with my local church, a beautiful community-based church with links to the local school, which my children attend. There's a good mix of young families and older members of the community, along with many members and volunteers from the Scouts and Girl Guides groups. Myself, my wife and my children have been regular attendees for a number of years and have always enjoyed the services. Unfortunately, due to the COVID pandemic, church services obviously were stopped and were conducted over Zoom every week. They were brilliantly run by, They were brilliantly run and my children thoroughly enjoyed the Sunday school group online. I'd like to ask them that. I will listen to the stories of a wide variety of religious crafts, such as we made a Noah's Ark out of paper plates.
Wow.
And toilet roll sheep. And as the Lord is my shepherd, whilst finishing their breakfast, having quickly got dressed for a 9 a.m. start. This was all church on Zoom. Following one Sunday morning service on Zoom in mid-December, the congregation were invited to attend a Christmas Zoom quiz the following Thursday. I've always been an avid quiz fan, taking inspiration from a close friend of mine who takes part in the local quiz league and had appeared on numerous TV quiz shows.
Wow.
Due to the lockdown, my quiz friend and other friends of ours based all around the north of England would meet up on a Zoom quiz every Wednesday night and have some fun, few drinks and a good catch-up, as we wouldn't see anyone else all week due to having been confined by the four walls. We remember it well. Having done a weekly quiz for several months at this point, I was feeling pretty clued up really on the quiz rounds, covering many areas of general knowledge, ranging from Star Wars anagram rounds to 90s Britpop and famous Belgians.
Wow, this is really good.
That's a short round. The Thursday Christmas church quiz soon came round, and I was quietly confident as I'd just been involved in a Christmas quiz the night before with my friends. 8 teams, including myself, turned up to the church quiz night. I fancied my chances and called my team the Legends. Other team names were the imaginative Bob and Margaret, the Christmas Crackers, and It Looks Like Reindeer. The questions were set by the church reverend and his wife. I'm not going to do it again. Also present was the reverend of the church twinned with our church, who called his team Foregone Conclusion. To be honest, I was miffed with the arrogance of this man and his team name, and my competitive streak came out, determined to beat him and display my superior general knowledge at all costs. Round 1 went well, as it was a picture round which involved naming the Christmas film. All was going well. I was neck and neck for the lead with Foregone Conclusion, but knew I might have a challenge on my hand. Round 2 was a music round, having to name the Christmas #1 hit. It was handy that from the quiz the night before, I'd been asked some of the same questions as this round, and I took an exciting 2-point lead. Things were looking up, and the twinned church reverend was starting to sweat. However, the final round was about Christmas and the Bible. Although I attend church regularly, I'm not a deeply spiritual man and didn't fancy my chances now, as this round was likely to have been foregone conclusion specialist topic. If he was ever going to participate in Mastermind, these would be his topics. I knew a few answers, but was struggling with a few questions. I have to say, I couldn't lose now. I'd come this far. I used my phone a friend, or should I say I Googled to find 2 or 3 answers, just to give me an extra edge. I got the extra edge. Noah's wife is called Emzara, and there are 66 books in the Bible. The last round finished, I scored 7 out of 10. And my now bitter rival had scored 8 out of 10, which means I'd won by 1 point. I scoffed that a reverend didn't know all the answers to the religious questions. This meant I'd won the quiz by 1, and I was awarded an amazing prize of a bottle of spirits. That'll be a bottle of Holy Spirits. At this point, foregone conclusion had steam coming out of his ears, as if all of hell's wrath had been unleashed. Mr. H. Poirot overwriting at this point.
Yeah.
I felt terrible but didn't have the heart to tell anyone until now. I seek forgiveness from the Almighty and to all the other quiz teams who participated that evening, who must know that I am really, really, truly sorry, whether you believe me or not. I'm not returning the spirits. Sister Susie, not in the pub.
Well, Mr. Poirot, the thing I have here is if you'd have Googled something in my pub quiz, you would have been barred
It's
from
the
the pub
thing that
quiz.
you can't do.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Put your phones away.
Put your phones away, no Google, no Shazam. So, no thank you, I do not forgive.
Brother from another gazette.
I mean, am I alone in thinking it's not really fair for, to have a round about the Bible when you've got a reverend?
It's the
I
church
think.
quiz.
I mean,
It's the church quiz.
but the reverend will have
Christmas.
read the Bible.
You go to church, you should know the answers.
Well, I'm going to say it's definitely weighted in his favour, and maybe didn't quite prove to be quite as infallible as he thought, did he, the reverend or the Pope? So for that reason,
Yes.
I choose to forgive.
61054, first word is Simon. The people's verdict, please. Tonight's confession came from Mr. H. Poirot, who cheated in a church quiz at Christmas and thinks he might have got away with it. Here's the people's verdict.
So Jeremy says, not forgiven, never cheat on a pub quiz, in the bin you go. However, Michelle says, forgiven, I'm on Matt's side today. You can't move goalposts in pub quizzes. And Henry also agrees.
It's a church
I
quiz.
agree with Matt. There shouldn't be a reverend taking part in the quiz. If the quiz is for the congregation, then just let them play. Quite right, Henry. And producer Susie insists that we include this one from Dawn. Not forgiven. What's the point of winning if it's not on your own merit? It means nothing.
Correct. Basically, the way to get yours read out is to say, I agree with Matt.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then it definitely
Yep.
gets on. Okay, thank you very much indeed for those. So if you have a confession, maybe it's a quiz confession, maybe it's a church confession, whatever it is, if it's good enough, we'll use it and you get a smart speaker. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.